Hey, welcome back to Vice Grip Garage. We're back to work on the Ford V8 powered twin track snowmobile. If you haven't seen part one yet, you're going to want to start there. After 20-30 years, I did get this thing to run for just a little bit, and then the water pump split in half. I sent some pictures to Krang over here, and he replied, which means, yep, I need to come see this thing in person. So he drove all night and he's here today. We're going to tear back into this thing, get the water pump replaced, do an Italian tune-up, try to grease and check all the chains and the chassis on this thing, get to the transmission, and we're going to see if we can drive this thing. So we were looking this over, and this chain, which comes off the axle as a reminder and then up to this drive unit to the track, was actually touching this bar. And what we found out is we could just pry this over. So the collar has separated from the sprocket. So this sprocket was just floating back and forth, and basically this was going to fail almost immediately because it's not, these gears aren't right over each other. So this was just going to walk off and explode, and then that chain was going to whip around at 72,000 RPM. And then we would have only that track turning, which would be an immediate hard left at 107. So what we're going to try to do is just reach in here with the welder and just tack weld the sprocket onto the shaft. And we're just going to call this a non-serviceable unit, and it's just going to have to stay that way, I guess. But that's about the only way that we're going to be able to fix this to run it quick. Super dirty, so we just put a can of brake clean, I think the whole can, and I'll see if I can weld it in there. Well, that's in there, even dirty in a not so good ground. The Lincoln did its job. I got 3 big spot welds in there, and just a reminder, fellers, don't weld brake clean unless it doesn't have the fluoride and the chloride and the bloride, and there's a bunch of other rides. But basically the smoke, it's bad for you. So last time we got this thing running, and it actually started really easy. It was blowing a bunch of rust and stuff out of the exhaust. Looked pretty cool, actually. We have some sticky valves is what I think is going on. Not all 8 are firing consistently, but that's going to come out of it once we can get some coolant in here so we can run it long enough. And then, you know, modulate the throttle to wide open consistently. But before we get to there, we got to get this water pump replaced. On the bottom here, it's split. And what I'm guessing happened is the last time it was ran, they just pushed it in the barn there. And it split during the winter, drained everything out, and that's why the rad was almost all the way empty. So we're going to have to take pretty much the whole front of this engine off. And I was joking last video, I said there actually is 2 different rotations. There's standard rotation and reverse rotation with Ford, and it's really easy to tell. If the pulley is run by the ribs, or the belt goes on the outside, it's standard rotation, rotates with the crank. If the smooth side of the belt, or going under or on top is the smooth side of the belt, then you have a reverse flow water pump. So you got to pay attention to that on Fords. We don't think that charging whirler works over there. I did put a meter on it just for a few minutes last time it was running, and I'm not getting anything, and the wiring's pretty burnt up. So we may or may not replace that, being as we only have 1.2 gallons of fuel at a time. Either the battery's going to go dead or we're going to run out of gas. So I mean, this is basically going to be a short blast, and we're probably just going to have to carry batteries and fuel with us. So I may not even worry about that charger whirler, but I need it on there so the belt can run the water pump. So we're just going to dig in quick. We're down to 1 more bolt and then the lower rad, and I think we can snag this right off. Oh, look at that. Oh, Oh, wow. So we might have to figure out how to flush this because it's clearly plugged. If the water pump jackets are looking like this, then in the heads it's got to be pretty grody. Old pump. So we've been digging and scraping stuff out of this, and we're getting her kind of clean. And ideally, this needs to be flushed with a garden hose or some sort of water pressure. But since I work in a barn, that's not possible. So we're gonna do the right thing and just jam an air hose in there and that's probably not gonna do much, but it's gonna make us feel better that we attempted to do something here. And there'll probably also be some brake clean and some carb cleaner getting sprayed in there, some other combustible materials. Right now he's pulling the thermostat out so we can run her wide open. Housing. Wow. Yeah, get the hammer out.
That's clean.
Oh. So on the other side of the thermostat, everything's kind of gelled up. And it looks fairly good in there actually. Shut this down so they don't kick on at night. The belts can light on fire, then you're in trouble. Oh, my poor floor. So how do we get it?
Through that hole?
Maybe jam it in that one and see if it comes back around. Nothing. Maybe jam it in that one. You want another egg?
Shot. There we go.
There, I heard something.
What's going on?
Yeah. So there definitely was a blockage. You can hear it. Yeah, I've got a little bit of air. Let me fire the compressor up. Got the thermostat cleaned up. Just ran it through the bench mounted cheek poker there. But we want to test it before we throw it back in. There's a couple ways you can do this. You could just throw them in some hot water on the stove. But I just take a bottle torch and just a little bit at a time. And as the spring heats, you'll see this open up here. This one might be stuck. There it goes. Don't hit it anymore because you don't want to warp that spring. But this thermostat operates, so we're good to go. We'll throw her back in. So last video we were looking at the intake here, and we determined it was a 1966 car, like a Torino, something like that. We found some more casting numbers down here. So this is in fact for certain a 1965, 66, 289. Well, we got everything buttoned down. We went to lunch, let the Riv dry. I'm gonna fill her up with some Peak 50/50. That's pre-diluted, so you just drop her in and let her eat. And we're fairly confident there's not gonna be any leaks here. We'll probably put 2 gallons in, and then we'll fire it up, get things circulating. So as we're bringing her up to temp here, we got quite a bit of stuff burning off, and even some of this header paint is still coming off. This one here is extremely hot. This one, not so much. So number 2 power pumper just quite ain't percolating. I'm gonna give her the old Italian tune-up, which is just a dose of barium and B12 right down the yap, and then you want to give her way too much throttle. You just keep doing that, and that'll free sticky rings, stuff like that up. It'll clean the combustion chamber up, even some of the valves, and I'm hoping that'll bring this back around. It will, and by then we'll definitely have it to temperature, and then we can see if that little tiny fan is even going to keep this thing cool. Quite honestly, I don't think that's enough fan, but we'll see what happens. We're letting it sit and cool. It did fine. It got to about 220, but I mean, we're really ripping on her. But we're contemplating getting the oil-soaked mouse nest out of the belly here before we have a flaming ride, basically. But in a minute here, when it cools down, we're gonna move on to greasing up all the chains. And there's a couple zerks, at least on that side there is. I don't know if there is over here. Get everything greased down. I did pull the propulsion selector blood stick over there. It was actually full and didn't look that bad, but we'll check it here again in a minute. So the trans is full, and then I guess we're ready to see if this thing moves. Finally cooled down enough we can work around her. Chris is back here WD-40 in the chain up. What do you think about these tracks? You've been on tracks all your life. Oh, okay. Well, that's not good news. They are cleated too, so when these come shooting off at 115 miles an hour, that should do no damage. Oh, fixed. That chain's good. I think I got just this one over here, the one we welded on today. Oofda, that is roasty. Get some juice on this one, maybe put a little bit more fuel in it, and then we're ready to fire this thing back up, jam it in gear, and see if this thing moves. I'm not even going to sit in it yet, because with how heavy it is, I really don't think it's going to move on its own. I just want to make sure that the transmission's actually, you know, selecting on the gears. Chris went around this whole thing. We've got like 15 cans of WD-40 in it. We confirmed that the tracks are going to explode immediately, so that's good. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to reach in and fire it up. Chris is going to run the Select-O-Matic, and we'll try for reverse first. And just in case, he'll be ready to go right to neutral, right? Okay, and then we're going to bring her down in the drive. The good news is there's a wall there, so it can't go very far. Here we go. me. So some really horrible noises in reverse. And I think it's coming from that gear combination thing back there. But drive seems solid. It actually just took off on its own in drive, which is actually pretty impressive considering what this thing weighs. So I've seen enough. I think we're just gonna roll the door open and let's go scoot it around, huh? Krang knotted 6 times, which means high fax on the other side went down. We actually left a powder of high fax. So this is more good news. We're just gonna continue to pretend we didn't see that. But whilst I was down here, I noticed this spring flopping, and that's a spring off of a Lazy Boy recliner from 1972. And what that does, it's supposed to come across here and put tension on both these idler pulleys, and it keeps that chain tight from here to here. So that grinding, building, collapsing sound was those chains just jumping on those sprockets. And obviously we can't have that. So I'm gonna reach in there and try to clip it on something. I know for sure I don't have another one of those, so we'll have to make it work. Wasn't able to get that spring to work. Needs a longer hookalizer, less springage in the center edge. So we'll go to the hardware store in a minute. We're just gonna have to be delicate bringing her back, and I think once we get tension on it going forward, we'll be fine. We don't have a plan, but if and we did have one, I'm just gonna ease it out here, try to get them skis on this ice. And then a couple of guys thought, you know, pin the ears down. I guess a guy could have done size testing way earlier in the process. Oh, it's not good. Oh. My foot can't hit the throttle because the ignition hits my shin, and there's a bar in here. There's a chunk of high fax. It's too narrow. Okay. Hey, is the throttle not hooked up? I can't. I'm shoehorned in here, and I gotta sit kind of sideways because the hips don't fit between the seat. I don't know if Carmen could fit betwixt us. He was a smaller feller, I'm guessing. Pit chief is dialing in the old throttle cable. If I angle my foot at about 53 degrees, I can just kind of rotate on it. My concern is I'm not going to be able to do wide open throttle. Did that go floored?
Floor it. Bring it back.
Because that's putting my foot all the way to the alligator tip up here. You'll get that on them bigger jobs.
Oh yeah, that's over floored.
Oh, she's probably flooded now. It feels really wrong. Chain off. Something broke. All right, climbing out. Well, I got bad news, fellers. It's down. That's it. There's just, it can be fixed, but I'm just not the guy to do it right now. Unfortunately, what happened, my biggest fear, and I've been saying it, right when we put it in reverse, the drive cogs just absolutely exploded. And if you're not familiar with what these are, they're plastic gears, and this nub right here comes around and grabs the track that has rubber grooves in it. So these kind of go around in a circle like that, and it's completely gone. One side must have exploded, and then it's just too much weight, and that's just due to age and sitting and rotting, and that's a lot of work putting those drive wheels in. But hopefully Carmen's looking down smiling. Not only does it run, but we got her dialed in pretty darn good. It sounds just nasty, but she ain't gonna drive. That's pretty much it. So I think what we're gonna do just in memory of Carmen, is we're going to fire this thing up one more time and just let her sing. And then I'm going to load her up on the trailer, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring this back to Thompson Motorsports, and hopefully he can put it on display and tell the story, and we'll get some paperwork and some documents to sit with this thing. But it's nice knowing that it runs and they can turn the key and fire this thing up and show folks this really cool machine that he made.